Have you ever seen a computer run a program from punched cards? If you fell asleep on the job that day, 1,000 holes would have to be punched all over again. Sounds pretty terrifying, right? Let's take a look back at the history of computer memory to see how it has evolved. Punched card. Long before electronic computers, punch cards were used to control textile looms. The idea was simple. A position with a hole meant 1 and no hole meant 0. The first computers borrowed this idea. In terms of capacity, each card could only hold about 80 characters. Storing a book this way would have been incredibly expensive. And punching the holes was no simple task. Calling them programmers back then was a bit of a stretch. Hole punchers would have been more accurate. A single program could take a month to punch. And because they were on paper, the storage quality was poor, not to mention they could easily warp. Mercury delay line memory. In the 1940s, a faster medium than paper was needed, and mercury delay line memory was born. Data was converted into sound waves, sent through a tube filled with mercury, and circulated to be stored. The capacity of this system was extremely modest. One mercury tube could store between 1,000 and 1,500 bits. Storing a single modern photograph would have required hundreds of these tubes. In terms of durability, it was a disaster. The system was extremely bulky, sensitive to temperature, and if the power was lost, all data would vanish instantly. It was more like RAM than a hard drive. Not to mention, mercury is a highly toxic substance. Magnetic drum memory. The mercury technology was clearly too dangerous. Soon after, magnetic drum memory was introduced. It consisted of a large metal drum coated with magnetic material that spun at high speed to store data. The capacity was a significant improvement, from a few kilobytes in early versions to several megabytes later on. The best magnetic drum of that era could probably only store 1 or 2 photos taken with your phone today. It was much safer and more reliable than mercury memory, but it was still a complex mechanical device. It was very expensive, and any physical impact could damage the drum's surface, causing data to be wiped. Magnetic tape. Around the same time, magnetic tape appeared. It worked just like a cassette tape, storing data sequentially on a long strip. This was the champion of low-cost, high-capacity storage. Tapes from that era could already hold several megabytes, and the technology is still used today for backups, with modern cartridges holding tens of terabytes. But its fatal flaw was sequential access. You had to wind from the beginning to the end to find your data. In terms of durability, magnetic tape could snap, stretch, or be damaged by magnetic fields. Floppy disks. As computers became smaller, people needed a way to move data. The 8-inch floppy disk was born. It was a giant, flexible piece of plastic coated with magnetic material. Its capacity was extremely low, only a few hundred kilobytes. I used to use them to copy shortcuts from internet cafes, hoping they would run on my computer at home. Of course, after getting home, I found out they didn't work. I learned a new lesson about shortcuts that day. Most floppy disks were used for storing text. Low-resolution images could be stored, but weren't very useful, as there wasn't much you could do with them at the time. HDD, hard disk drive. And now we come to the main character that dominated the world for decades, the HDD. Instead of a single floppy disk, an HDD uses multiple rigid metal platters stacked on top of each other, spinning at thousands of revolutions per minute. The first HDD was the size of 2 refrigerators but only held 5 megabytes, equivalent to about 1 song. But the technology developed at a breakneck pace, and today, a compact HDD can hold up to 20 terabytes. That's a lot of study materials from Pornhub. However, its durability isn't great. If you drop it, it's almost certainly broken. If you used a PC back in the HDD era, you'll never forget running the defragmenter to speed up your drive. SATA SSD, solid-state drive. Around the 2010s, the SSD revolution arrived. It had no more spinning disks, instead using flash memory chips. Speed was the game changer. Computers could boot up in just a few seconds. It became a trend for everyone to upgrade to an SSD for their boot drive because of the speed. But at the time, the cost was still high, so using it just for booting made sense. Today, the price of SATA SSDs has dropped significantly. You can now afford to use one as your C drive for heavy programs or AAA games. NVMe M2 SSD. Though fast, early SSDs were still bottlenecked by the old SATA connection. That's why the NVMe SSD was created. It plugs directly into the motherboard, communicating with the CPU through a high-speed lane. The result is unchained speed, many times faster than a SATA SSD, making it perfect for ultra-demanding tasks like editing 4K video or playing blockbuster games. In terms of durability, it's similar to a SATA SSD and very resistant to impact. The only potential issue is heat, which is why many high-performance NVMe SSDs come with a heatsink. So which one should you use now? HDD is still the king of cheap storage. If you need a place to store terabytes of movies, photos, and documents, it's the best choice. SATA SSD is the star for price to performance. It's perfect for reviving an old laptop or for use as a secondary drive to install games. NVMe SSD is for those who need maximum performance. Use it as your main drive for Windows and your most demanding software. And that is the journey of computer memory. From paper cards and strange mercury tubes through slow-spinning disks, and finally to lightning-fast memory chips. This evolution has completely changed how we experience computing, making everything more instant and seamless. By the way, I've made a few other cool videos too, so don't forget to watch them later. Thanks for tuning in.